Hello, my name is Jan Oster, and I'm a professor for media law and digital law at the University of Osnabrück in Germany. And I would like to share my thoughts on artificial intelligence and diversity of opinion. What is diversity of opinion? In essence, the concept of diversity of opinion, we can also speak of plurality or pluralism of opinion, requires the guarantee of the widest possible circulation of news, ideas, and opinions, as well as the widest access to information by society as a whole. In the European Union, we might be even more familiar with the concept of media pluralism, which is even codified in the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. Media pluralism or media plurality is essentially a subcategory of diversity of opinion for the media landscape, in particular for broadcasters, for newspapers, and so on. So what is the problem? What is the conflict between artificial intelligence and diversity of opinion? AI systems are increasingly used in areas that are relevant to the diversity of opinion. I would just like to give two examples. AI systems generate new information. Newspaper publishers, for example, use AI to generate texts, and AI can also be used to produce or falsify images, videos, or audio recordings in a deceptively real way. We often speak of deep fakes in this context. I prefer the term synthetic media. Such synthetic media harbor the risk of reflecting and disseminating existing biases and factual errors in the data sets. This idea is not new. An AI system is only as good as the underlying data set. But an AI system doesn't generate a new opinion. An AI system doesn't have its own opinion. It can merely work with the opinions, with the information included in the data set itself. And if the data set is prone to bias or factual mistakes, then these mistakes will be reflected in the content generated by the AI system. But AI systems also operate in social networks. Here they do not generate new information, but they aggregate, select, and present content generated by users. These systems then specifically tailor content to the interests and inclinations of users, which in turn leads to the reinforcement of like-minded opinions. Yeah, so you all know this. If you watch a video on YouTube or read something on Facebook, then the system suggests to you, you might also like this content. You might also like to watch that video. And this, of course, leads to the risk of filter bubbles and echo chambers, something I would like to return later on and something I would be very happy to discuss at the conference. So how does the EU react to these challenges of AI for the diversity of opinion? The EU has adopted several pieces of legislation in the recent past, including the AI Act, the Digital Services Act, and the European Media Freedom Act. And one of the questions I'll be having at the end of my presentation is, what role is actually there left for member states' legislation? Do we still need member state legislation, regulation of diversity of opinion and media pluralism in particular on online platforms? Do we need such a legislation from the member states as well? To begin with the AI Act, so the AI Act relates, for the purposes of my presentation, specifically to the first problem, to the generation of new information, of new content by systems of artificial intelligence. And we can keep this rather short because the AI Act doesn't say anything about diversity of opinion or media pluralism. The AI Act merely imposes a transparency requirement for deepfakes. But like I said, it doesn't regulate media pluralism. So in this context, there is nothing we can expect from the AI Act in particular. The DSA is slightly different, but even the DSA doesn't provide a holistic approach to diversity of opinion and media pluralism on online platforms, but merely a punctual approach. So the DSA essentially requires online platforms to consider pluralism of the media in their content moderation and under their obligation to conduct risk assessments. And this latter obligation only applies to so-called very large online platforms with at least 45 million users in the EU. But again, I should reiterate, the DSA doesn't provide a sort of one-size-fits-all approach to media pluralism and diversity of opinion on online platforms in general. And the same applies to the European Media Freedom Act. We do have Article 3 of the European Media Freedom Act. Accordingly, recipients of media services have a right to receive a plurality of news and current affairs content to the benefit of public discourse. But I'm not entirely sure whether this is really a subjective, enforceable right that I can invoke at a court. Whether, for example, I can sue a broadcaster to provide a more diverse range of opinions in its program. Yeah. What I think is more important, what will be more important in practice, are the provisions, again, on very large online platforms and their treatment of media service providers' content. So when they intend to remove content provided by a media service provider, very large online platforms also have to consider pluralism of the media. Again, you see, we have a punctual approach to media pluralism. Media pluralism is mentioned in this context, but just as the DSA, the EMFA doesn't provide an all-encompassing framework on media pluralism in general or on diversity of opinion in general. And this leads me to a couple of questions that I would like to discuss with you at the conference. As far as law and policy is concerned, I'm asking, to what extent do member states retain the competence to regulate diversity of opinion on online platforms? And to what extent is this actually politically necessary? So I suggest it is politically necessary. Recall that in order to qualify as a very large online platform, the platform needs to have at least 45 million active users in the EU. So what about a platform with, say, 44 active users in the EU, active particularly in one member state, say, due to the platform's language? These users are only and mostly one particular EU member state. Shouldn't the member state then have the competence to regulate diversity of opinion on this particular platform? A question I have to colleagues and experts from media and communication studies: to what extent are filter bubbles and echo chambers on platforms empirically corroborated? So when I follow the public discourse, political speeches, you see filter bubbles and echo chambers apparently everywhere. But the deeper I delve into specific publications from experts on media and communication studies, the more I doubt that such filter bubbles and echo chambers do really exist, or at least are empirically supported. So I would be very, very happy to hear your opinion and your experience on this question. And then finally, a question to all of you. To what extent can we even use AI systems to safeguard diversity of opinion? Thus far, I have demonstrated AI systems as a risk to diversity of opinion. But to what extent can we even exploit them to have a greater diversity of opinion on online platforms? At the same time, I'm asking, what are the risks involved in using AI systems to generate a greater diversity of opinion on online platforms? Allow me to refer to a decision by the European Court of Human Rights, Manole versus Moldova, where the court emphasized the importance and the risks of diversity of opinion for democracy. It is of the essence of democracy to allow diverse political programs to be proposed and debated, provided that they do not harm democracy itself. So this expresses the basic idea that intolerance must not be tolerated. We tolerate everything except for intolerance. And the question is, if we employ AI systems to create a greater diversity of opinion on online platforms, would this then also support the visibility of opinions that are harmful for public discourse and even harmful for democracy? I would be very happy to discuss these and other questions with you at the conference, and I would very much look forward to seeing you. Thus far, I thank you very much for your attention.